This week on the Destination Angler.
Oh, we're still pretty spoiled here. For us, light tippet is like 4x or 5x.
What? Are you serious? That's going down from what, 3?
This time of year, everyone's 2 and 3x.
Do you venture into the world of 5X ever?
Ooh, rarely.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, we could stop the show like right now and say, folks, there's why you should go and fish this water. You don't even have to go down to 5X, and these are fantastic fish. That was Blake Jackson on Grey Reef. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, fueling your next cast with amazing coffee delivered to your doorstep one batch at a time. Get started today and save 20%. By Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. By Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping trout anglers avoid the crowds and explore new public water. Download it in the App Store today and get 20% off using promo code DESTINATION20. And by Adams Built Fishing Gear, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear built to last at an affordable price. Up next on the Destination Angler, we journey to the wild and remote Flathead River in Montana with author, conservationist, and outfitter Hillary Hutchison. Then we'll explore the Beartooth Mountains and another Montana gem, the Stillwater River, for some fantastic dry fly fishing. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on Mongolia, the land of Genghis Khan, in search of the legendary taimen, the world's largest trout species, with Michael Karanchi from Mongolia River Outfitters. You won't want to miss these shows. And today our destination is the world-famous Grey Reef on the North Platte River. And our guest is expert fly fishing guide Blake Jackson, co-owner and operator of the Ugly Bug Fly Shop and Crazy Rainbow Fly Fishing, Casper, Wyoming. Grey Reef is one of the great tailwaters of the West, offering a 70-mile western fly fishing experience with oversized football-shaped wild trout and plenty of solitude where 50-fish days per boat are common. Blake grew up in Wyoming doing what Wyoming kids do, hunting, fishing, and playing sports. A shot putter in college, Blake quickly realized that a fly fishing guide could not afford to live in Bozeman and returned to Wyoming, where he now co-owns the Ugly Bug Fly Shop. Today we explore the ins and outs of the reef, Miracle Mile, and Fremon Canyon, and the conservation story behind the trophy fly fishing here, plus slow it down streamer techniques, local fly patterns like the Ditch Witch and McGruber, and stories from Mongolia, Wyoming elk hunting, naked customers, and why you need to cast to the center of the stream. Stick around to the end for some great shore lunch ideas. Hey, let's hear from Blake. All right, Blake, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, this fishery, the North Platte's been on my radar for a long, long time. I just haven't gotten around to making some phone calls up your way and found a guy like you to get on the show and talk about it because, man, it's a fantastic fishery. I've never fished it. From what I hear, it's fantastic. But anyway, before we get into that, how's your winter going? You're doing some construction work, I hear?
Been lead janitor most of the winter.
Is that so? What happens when you run a fly shop in the wintertime?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone says run a fly shop, it'll be awesome. You end up taking out the trash and shoveling sidewalks and doing all that sort of stuff. But no, it's good. We're doing some improvements this winter and trying to get them all completed before we really crank up the season. We've been relatively busy and we're pretty fortunate here. We get a pretty early start, but we really get going here shortly. So trying to get all those projects done before that happens.
Okay. And how's your snowpack this year?
We're pretty light around here, but the headwaters, where all our water comes from, is in good shape, thank goodness. So, but around Casper here, it's been a pretty mild winter, much different than last year. Last year we were pretty hammered. Winter set in hard and stuck around for a long time.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's been pretty enjoyable for a Wyoming winter.
When does the fishing start for you? I mean, when do you really start getting some customers?
Yeah, like next week, mid-April is really kicks off big time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're mid-March right now. So even in March, you'll get some people that wanting to fish?
Yeah, we get a fair bit. I mean, I guess as a company, we'll do a couple hundred trips in March as a company total, but April it really gets cranking. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the North Platte and kind of want to start with this Grey Reef area because it seems to be one of the more famous stretches and kind of the star of the show today. So in your mind, like, give us the pitch on Grey Reef. What makes it so special, so revered?
I think it's got a little bit of everything. I think the biggest, probably the biggest thing it's known for is just its sheer biomass. It's got a good healthy fish and a lot of them. So it's a very friendly place to avid angler as well as a beginner angler simply just because of the raw number of fish in the fishery. Access is relatively easy. It's a pretty mild kind of meandering plains river, so for anglers looking to do it on their own, it's there's no dangerous rapids to watch out for or anything if they're floating.
Yeah.
But more than anything, I think it's the raw number of fish and the trophy potential in which the reef has. It's a pretty unique place.
That's what I keep reading about is between the reef and the mile that you've got some really big fish out there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean it's a unique fishery. We're about 95% rainbow trout based now. We don't have many brown trout, but the brown trout we do have are extremely large. Those are often the kind of Instagram shots, and the
Sure.
big jumbo gray reef fish. A lot of those are those really big brown trout. But it's got a little bit of everything. It's a classic tailwater fishery. It's really one of those fisheries. If you were to look at how to design a water treatment facility, it kind of follows that same map. So you've got multiple reservoirs in a series with a section of river in between each reservoir. So you kind of get the settling pond, and then you get movement, and then another settling pond, and obviously Grey Reef's at the bottom end of that section. So so even during runoff season, you often don't have much of a runoff issue to deal with. It stays pretty darn clean,
Yeah, nice.
and it starts early too, right? I mean, especially out here in the Rockies right now. This is one of the there's a few other fisheries that are fishing pretty good right now, but this is one of the fisheries that kind of gets started the earliest. So for a Colorado angler or that sort of thing, this is a great kind of early spring, late winter option.
Yeah. When people come out to Casper and fish with you, I mean, what surprises them the most about this area?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of folks, depending on where they're from, a lot of folks from the East Coast are just shocked at like the sheer amount of open space in Wyoming
Cool.
and slightly, I wouldn't say uncomfortable with it, right? But if you're used to pine forests and never being able to see, 80 or 90 miles in every direction, that
Really? So it's totally flat except for these river bottoms?
yeah, I wouldn't say it's flat, but a lot of it's kind of the vistas, right? When you're driving out to the river, you hit a little crest of a ridge and you can see a mountain range that's 95 miles away. And people just don't kind of realize the vastness of Wyoming. And then obviously the public land as well, right? Over half the state's public land. So, for the outdoorsman that likes to ATV or bicycle or camp, most of it being Bureau of Land Management property, there's a ton of opportunity for that.
Okay. What is it about, obviously Wyoming is just a massive mecca for fly fishing, but over in your area, like what is there? You've got the North Platte. Are there some other things that you can go to and fish, lakes, other things?
Yeah, there's a fair number of lakes, reservoirs. There's some natural occurring lakes as well, but most of it's reservoir based. Obviously, fishing's huge here on the river as well as on those reservoirs, mostly for walleye. A few of them have some pike in them, and sunfish and perch and bluegill and that sort of thing. But the big draw, I think, when a lot of people think of Wyoming, is it's the trout aspect of it. But the walleye fishing is really coming on strong, and then of course Wyoming is a giant hunting state. We get a lot of tourists that come to visit for to pursue antelope or to pursue deer or elk throughout the hunting season. We
Yeah.
see a lot of that in the fall also.
You a hunter yourself?
I am, yeah. Yeah, I love to hunt.
How'd you do this fall?
Good. Yeah, I had a good season. I got nice bull elk and a couple of cow elk, and the freezer
Really?
jam packed. Yeah, some antelope, and pretty fortunate. If you're a resident of Wyoming, yeah, getting tags and filling the freezer it's a chore still, don't get me wrong, but it's easier than some other states as far as drawing tags. And a lot of it just has to do with our, low population density, right? There's just,
Like the lowest in the lower 48, I believe.
yeah, about 500,000. So the running joke's always that there's 3 times the amount of antelope in this state than there is people.
My kind of state, man. That sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of a shot did you have with your bull elk?
Not a bad one, about a 35-yard shot with my bow. And then
with a bow. Oh, nice.
Yep. And then, the cow elk were kind of later season and a little further with a rifle, a couple 100 yards, but nothing too crazy.
How big was that elk?
It's a good 6-point, just a good mature 6. It's not a giant. It's a 15, 320. It's a good 6, but nothing enormous.
Like how much does a good 6 weigh on the hoof?
Ooh, high 700s.
700 pounds. And so
Yeah.
you and how many buddies dragged that thing out of there or quartered it? Is that what you do?
Me and a buddy. Yeah.
Okay. Now you were a shot putter in college, right? So I'm guessing you'd be the right guy to be pulling an elk out.
Pretty good pack mule. Yeah.
Is that right? So what's the heaviest part of an elk? Like when you do quarter those up?
Hindquarters. Yeah, both hindquarters is, the bulk of the meat comes from the hindquarters, but
Okay.
often we'll do like a hind quarter and a front shoulder and a load, or depending on the size of the bull. So sometimes if you're packing the head and the hide and quarters, that might be it's definitely the most awkward. It might not be the heaviest, but if
It's just bulky.
you're really trying to pack the head and the hide to,
Isn't that why God made ATVs though?
yep. But in a way, you gotta love Wyoming, many locations, right? If it's national forest or wilderness area, you can't use any of that
Oh,
stuff. Which
really?
keeps a lot of the people out of that.
How far back in were you?
It wasn't too bad, about 6 miles.
So you hiked this thing out 6 miles?
Yeah, and it took 4 trips and 2 trips, but there and back, and then a third trip to go get our camp and hike it out as well. So yeah, it's work.
That's some dedication, but you got a freezer full of elk now.
Yeah,
Multiple.
no complaints.
Yeah, that makes it worth it. I tell you, I can't even find elk here in Indiana. The elk I buy are from New Zealand.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
especially with the current prices of the grocery stores, right? It's I think every grocery store anymore is whole paycheck, right?
Yeah.
And Whole Foods has just jumped up to the next level where it's
Whole
more and more
price.
expensive. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, we can talk hunting more, but let's talk fishing. So I think most of my anglers are fly fishermen, so I'm sure of that. I'm not sure about hunters, but anyway. So can you give us a rundown of the North Platte? Like just give us a rundown, like from top to bottom. In terms of the trout fishing. Like what are the major sections anglers should kind of be thinking about?
Sure. So it's an odd fishery. A lot of anglers, depending on where they're from, but a lot of anglers don't think of a major fishery running north, but the North Platte is one of those fisheries that runs north. So it really starts in northern Colorado near the state line of Wyoming, and then runs in what we call the upper North Platte through near the town of Encampment and through Saratoga, and then runs down into the first reservoir in the system is Seminole. And once you leave Seminole Reservoir on the downstream side, it hits a second small reservoir called Cortez, and right below that is the Miracle Mile, and that's really where our operations start. The Upper North Platte is a fine fishery and a great fishery, but obviously it's a freestone fishery that battles things that normal freestones battle, right? With runoff early in the spring and at times low water issues in the summer, that sort of thing. But it's a fabulous fishery, and those towns are, Saratoga is a real gem of a location within the state. Yeah, it's a beautiful location. But as you move down into Seminole and then down into the Miracle Mile stretch, you've got approximately 9 miles of river in between Cortez Reservoir and Pathfinder Reservoir, and that was called the Miracle Mile. So many people get confused with that and think of it as like a 1 mile piece of water, but it actually fluctuates quite a bit, and that's really due to the height of the Pathfinder Reservoir. So as it drops, the river becomes longer, right? Because the reservoir shrinks in size, and then as it rises, the stretch of river per se gets a little shorter because it kind of turns lakey and and gets into reservoir habitat on the bottom end. And then as you leave Pathfinder, you've got a small stretch of river that is again between Pathfinder and Alcova Reservoir that's called Fremon Canyon. And that's where the explorer John C. Fremont lost a few people in his exploring party in that kind of gnarly stretch, which is a beautiful stretch of river. It's a smaller, they divert some of the water of the North Platte through a pipeline that runs into the reservoir, runs into a power plant. So often the flow, the CFS flow through Fremont Canyon is, between 75 and a couple hundred CFS. So it's a smaller stretch and a little more wade fishing friendly than the main North Platte itself.
Can I get down there as a wade fisherman? It's in a canyon. I can get down there, huh?
It is, yeah. There's an upper stretch. It's a really cool kind of conservation story that was kind of all put together from our local conservation group called the Wyoming Flycasters. They acquired the property from a landowner, bought the water rights to maintain a minimum flow, did a bunch of restoration to the stream bank or the river channel, and then, secured that minimum flow, and Mother Nature kind of took care of itself. And the following year, the reservoir spilled over and we got a bunch of those big lake fish that got into that stretch of river, and with adequate spawning habitat and minimum flows, it's really thrived. So there's an upper stretch that everyone kind of calls, all the locals call the meadow. And the meadow stretch is very friendly to just about any wade fishing angler, right? It's often you don't even have to get in the water. You can kind of walk through this meandering mountain meadow.
Really? Oh, cool.
As you go down in the canyon, it does get much more serious. And the further you go down, the more and more serious it gets. Near the bottom end, it's a world-class rock climbing location with sheer rock cliffs that go all the way down to the river. So it isn't necessarily fishing friendly at the bottom end, but there's multiple miles of very quality fishing in there.
Okay. Yeah. And I can walk in there, and John C. Public can just walk in there, huh?
100%. Yep.
Okay.
There's an access point, and it's very well marked. There's kind of an established parking lot.
Okay.
Being that the landowner owns up to basically the right of way, right? There's still a fence there, but there's easements through the fence, and it's all marked as to how to get down to the access. Yeah, it's a beautiful kind of picturesque location. It's a great little fishery.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And then as you drop downstream, Fremont Canyon stretch of the North Platte drops into Alcova Reservoir. And then Alcova Reservoir drops into Grey Reef Reservoir with another little stretch of river in between that. Kind of going back to the water treatment facility thing, right? You got all these reservoirs in a series, but once it departs Grey Reef Reservoir, you've got about 30 miles here from the town of Casper upstream until you hit Grey Reef Dam, 30 miles by road. So you start adding in all the S-bends and curves of the river. You've got, I think, like 47 miles, something like that, from the town of Casper up to Grey Reef Dam itself.
And that's good fishing from Casper on up.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's very good fishing. The upper 8 miles in the spring runoff season is kind of the gem. Once you get below that first 8 mile section, you start getting into some smaller tributary creeks that can be some culprits of mud at times, right? You get some sediment and mountain runoff coming from the mountain that brings in some debris. But the upper 8 miles is almost always clear. It takes a really serious rain event for.
Hey, folks, Angler's Coffee wants to fuel your next cast with great coffee delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. Anglers has been hard at work making great new coffee blends, such as the Stimulator Blend. This high-octane coffee has a delicious smoky flavor with 25% more caffeine. Sometimes you just need a little extra kick in the morning before you wet a line. Or how about the Rainbow Blend? Colorful and bright, this medium roast draws inspiration from the vibrant traits of the iconic fish. Much like the rainbow trout's vivid hues, you'll experience flavor reminiscent of the brilliant colors the trout is named for. And if you like it dark and bold, check out the Brown Trout Blend. This roast brings the spirit of the elusive brown trout with rich, dark chocolate notes, boldly intertwined with subtle smokiness, mirroring the rugged landscapes of the deep waters where brown trout thrive. And with every sip of Angler's Coffee, you support great conservation groups and charities such as the Mayfly Project. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com and fuel up today. Take 20% off your first subscription order by entering the code BREW20 at checkout. With so much information out there, it can get darn right confusing and even overwhelming to find the right fishing adventure. Sorting through all the options and fees can be quite the headache. Well, not anymore. I'm super excited to introduce Got Fishing. Got Fishing is a boutique booking agency for world-class fishing adventures around the world. They ensure that you are on the exact fishing trip that meets your skill level, budget, and desired experience. Whether you're a seasoned angler or new to the sport, Got Fishing's personalized service will help you decide which adventure is the best fit for you, your group, or even your business. Worry about fees? Worry no more. With Got Fishing, you won't pay anything extra because their services are entirely free for you. You see, Got Fishing exclusively partners with highly reputable outfitters who gladly compensate them for their services, ensuring a win-win situation. Explore the range of fishing adventures and learn more about the services Got Fishing provides at gotfishing.com. That's www.gotfishing.com. And check them out on Instagram too. When do you decide to fish below that 8 miles? Like, how do you decide to do that?
Really, it's a water clarity based thing. So as soon as the water cleans up enough that it, that the fish got a couple feet of visibility, that then people start fishing it. It's a little off color right now, but it would fish great right now if the clarity was clean enough to be successful.
Do you like it being a little off like that, a little off color?
Yeah, especially here, this fishery does really. A lot of people think it, kind of has a weird tannic or slate gray color to it, and a lot of that oil content. We're really high in bentonite. I don't know if a lot of your viewers might not realize bentonite's like the primary ingredient for cat litter.
There you go.
So when you think of the color of cat litter, right, it has that kind of slate grayish sort of color to it. And a lot of that's the bottom is that color. So even when the water's pretty clean, if you have some elevation, it looks like it's off color, even though the water's clean. It's just the bottom substrate. But yeah, I don't mind it off color at all. A couple feet of visibility is great. Even
A
less
couple feet.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, me too. I feel like when it gets really clear, it gets kind of tough, doesn't it?
It does. It gets technical, and especially closer to the dam, those fish get really buggy.
Yeah.
So paying attention to tippet weights, and you need to go down a size and fly, down a size on tippet, and a little further casts, all those sort of things when it gets more difficult.
Sure. How far down do you have to go? Like, I don't know, when it's clearest, maybe in the late summer.
Oh, we're still pretty spoiled here. For us, light tippet is like 4x or 5x.
What? Are you serious? That's going down from what, 3?
This time of year, everyone's 2 and 3x.
2 and 3x.
Yeah.
My gosh. Well, you're not breaking a whole lot of fish off with 2x on there, are you?
No, we don't break many off. Yeah.
What's the deal? I mean, how are these fish? I mean, this is a world famous place. They're not, leader shy or more tippet shy than that?
I think it's a combination. I think some of it's the water clarity. I also think some of it's, the time of year and what they're eating. That bentonite soil content leads to a really high population of leeches.
Okay.
And a really high population of worms. And so, a lot of them are eating like a size 10 leech, right? And they're eating it aggressively. So when they're eating a big pine squirrel leech, to tie that thing on with 12-pound tippet isn't, all that crazy. We're not whittling down 2x to fit it through a size 18 midge, right? So
right.
And often it's the size of bug we're fishing. And, when it does get clean and that kind of June time frame when they're on little PMDs, it definitely gets more technical, but even what we call technical isn't technical in comparison in many places.
Do you venture into the world of 5X ever?
Ooh, rarely.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. We could stop the show like right now and say, folks, there's why you should go and fish this water. You don't even have to go down to 5X, and these are fantastic fish.
About the only time I really go there is Trico's midsummer, and some of that of necessity. I can't get 4X through a size 20 small light Trico fly, right? So you got to bump down.
Right. So what's the water like the character of the water? You said it sounds like it's meandering, so I'm guessing it's a little slow. Like, what's the CFS? How wide is it? How deep is it? Give us a sense of that down by, Grey Reef.
Sure. It varies a little bit depending on time of year, like most Western fisheries, and being it's tailwater controlled. We're usually only at 500 CFS. And right now at 500, the river's probably 95 feet wide. So at times it can be relatively shallow. And it definitely gets bigger than that. It mid-May, once they turn on some irrigation and start fulfilling some irrigation needs downstream, we start seeing water levels at 1,500 and upwards. We get a few years that we'll get over 3 to 4,000 CFS, but rarely. It's usually 2,500, 3,000 is kind of the minimum or the max summer flows.
Is it fairly steady, or is it like some of these tailwaters, like in Arkansas, where it's like get out of the water's coming up, and
Yeah, no, we don't have to deal with the Taneycomo sort of thing.
okay,
When the
exactly.
alarm and things are changing, it's really pretty darn steady. It usually comes up somewhere, May 10th, between May 10th and May 15th, and then it'll run at that flow until September 10th, and they'll drop it
Really?
by 500. Yeah.
And isn't there quite a story there that you guys have worked pretty hard with whatever it is? Is it the Army Corps who runs the dams to get those flows put in place, those minimum flows? And
Yeah, the Game and Fish here has done a great job with both, the Bureau Rec and the Corps engineers had some part in it. And there's a unique success story there too. We were like the first major tailwater in the country to start we call it the flush, but it's basically a spring flushing flow, right? It's a, man-made flooding event purely to purge the system. So because of that bentonite and a lot of our soil content around here, many of those tributary creeks can really sediment load. And that sediment then, chokes out the pea gravel and chokes out bug life and is really a detriment mostly to the spawning habitat, but also a detriment to just the aquatic life of the fishery. So, it was realized that without the flushing flow, or, initially it came about as almost a test run of let's try to simulate a flood. And so the first year they raised it up to, I think it was 5,500 CFS for 10 days and left it at that. And then through some testing, they actually realized that like a stair stepping effect, more like a up and down motion, helped purge the system even more.
you mean instead of just going 5,500 and then back down to 500, you stair step it up and down?
Correct. So now they raise it basically 500 CFS every hour on the hour.
Huh.
Do it. And then they stair step it down the exact same way. So that then washes all the sediment from the center of the river or from the outsides of the river back into the center. And then when the next water raise happens, it purges the system again. So we usually have between a 5 and 10 day flushing flow here in March. And it, much like when Alaska salmon experience a raise in water, and then when it drops, it really ignites their internal instinct to start spawning.
Yeah, sure.
So it not only cleans the gravel, but it also, spurs them on a bit, right? So it makes the spawn that much more successful.
So what impact has that had on the fishery? Like what was it like before and what's it like now?
Oh, huge. Yeah. When I grew up around here, it was, you basically fished, some halfback streamers, like, small woolly bugger, woolly worm with a halfback sort of pheasant tail situation to it. Big orange scuds, like the scud population was pretty healthy, but there was very little bug life in the fishery. Most of that was just sediment based. And there's a few other dynamics that, ranching has changed in many locations now where they're no longer grazing cattle on the riverbank, which has helped with sediment and erosion and pH levels and all that sort of stuff. So the combination of cleaner gravel, less sediment, but also more bank structure, more willow growth, more bank growth has led to, it seems like every year our dry fly fishing just keeps steadily improving and the bug life keeps coming back more and more. So
how about your fish populations? Like, remember you told me a couple of weeks ago that it was like 500 fish per mile, and now it's cranked way up after all this flushing flow stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So, prior to the flushing flow things, depending on the stretch of river, it would almost always be under 1,000 fish per mile, but many cases it was 400 to 600 fish per mile. Some very big fish, but wasn't a high fish population numbers. And through the flushing flow, really as it got established, those fish numbers started really changing from 3 to 4,000 fish per mile is kind of the average. And we've seen some years where there's census here through town and kind of the more rearing section, we've seen fish numbers 7,200, 7,800
Really?
fish per mile.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's fantastic. Wow. Is it, do you, what is it like right up near the dam, like the first mile or two? Is it even higher?
No, it actually goes down a little bit.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of unique. So the closer you get to Casper, the fish numbers increase. And really what they found is the spawning age fish move up closer to the dam.
Which do? The what fish?
The spawning age fish,
Okay, spawn age. Yeah.
yeah, as they get mature and they move up to the dam, they don't really leave. They start sticking around up there. But a lot of the little fry and smaller fish leave that kind of trophy area. I think somewhat out of self-preservation, right? They're gonna get eaten if they stick around. But also, I think, higher water flows, that sort of thing, they come down further downstream where the river channel gets a little bigger and they can hide out. And then as they start reaching maturity, they start moving further upstream to find, appropriate gravel, basically, to spawn within.
Okay. Do you struggle finding new trout streams to explore? Tired of stumbling around country roads looking for access points? Looking to escape the crowds? Then look no further, because Trout Routes has meticulously mapped and classified over 50,000 trout streams covering the entire lower 48, including 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy to explore new trout waters. Many times, Trout Routes has helped me find new public water and get into fish fast. And the good folks at Trout Routes have been busy this winter making Trout Routes even better. Enter Stream Cards 2.0, the latest iOS release that brings together more info at your fingertips by organizing data like stream flows, access laws, nearest fly shops into easily accessible tabs for every river and stream in the app. Planning a trip? Well, you'll love the advanced filter features that let you hone in on top-rated streams, boat ramps, camping spots, and more. So what are you waiting for? Start exploring today by downloading Trout Routes on your Apple or Android phone. Hey anglers, if you're on the hunt for fishing gear that's as tough as you are, look no further than Adams Built Fishing Gear. Since 2014, Adams Built has been the go-to choice for anglers who demand quality without breaking the bank. Their lineup of lightweight waders, high-quality nets, and meticulously designed fly boxes is second to none. But here's what really impressed me. Adams Built stands behind their products like no other. Every single item is guaranteed to last. Yep, you heard that right. And get this, Adams Built waders even come with a lifetime repair replace guarantee, with you only paying for shipping. Now that's a deal you can't beat. So why settle for gear that won't last? Make the smart choice and gear up with Adams Built Fishing Gear today. Ask your local dealer for Adams Built or visit www.adamsbuiltfishing.com and tell them Steve sent you from the Destination Angler podcast. Give us a sense of what anglers can expect when they come out there, just in terms of how good the fishing is or can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's unique. It's still fishing and things can change from day to day, but it's not uncommon for an angler to, boat 20 to 30 fish per angler. So in that 50 fish category in a boat, we see that quite often.
It's a great day.
But there's a ton of variables in there, right? Between, skill levels, and it's still fishing and days can change, but we do get really spoiled with just raw fish numbers here and the opportunity at fish. It's one reason it's a great place to learn for a lot of anglers too, is that, you're not going to get just 4 chances all day long, right? You're going to set the hook repeatedly and have fish on and lose them and, go through the typical things, but it's not you have to make everyone count because you're not going to see another one sort of situation. Yeah, we get pretty spoiled.
You get some feedback from the fish throughout the day, huh?
Yeah, for sure. You quickly figure out how to mend.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and we're spoiled here too, because we can often you get someone a good drift and you can tell them to mend, and often Mother Nature takes care of it, right? There's immediate feedback because they mend appropriately and get a good drift and catch a fish. It's easy to teach that way.
Okay, so I've been reading up on this river. Lots of places I read, like people claiming like the largest average trout in the lower 48 are in this river system in these areas you're talking about. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. We get, there's ups and downs to every fishery, and times a year can change a little bit, but we get so spoiled here. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact of, oh, it's just another 20-inch rainbow, or yeah, we found a decent one today. It was 22 or 23. and we kind of nonchalantly throw it off, right? Because we see it's not uncommon for us to see, many fish over that 2 foot category in a season, and then see, a few of them in that high 20-inch mark throughout the year as well.
Rainbows.
So rainbows, and yeah, and then see the brown trout as well can jump into that category. But there's not many places left that you can go catch a 24-inch, 8-pound rainbow in the lower 48. It's
Right.
just not a common thing.
That aren't pellet fed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So what is a 20-inch, 8-pound rainbow? How's the fight on a big hog like that?
Yeah, you get pretty spoiled. It's fun.
Yeah.
Often we're in a drift boat base, so in a weird way, I think our landing ratio goes up a little, because as a rower, you can kind of help your angler and help chase fish down and
Sure.
with them, and you're not trying to fight them up a spillway of a run or something of that nature. So we get a little more spoiled there. I think our landing ratio on some of those larger fish is a little greater than some other fisheries, but the mile in particular, it gets a unique ebb and flow with fish moving in and out of that reservoir. And it really very much reminds me of an Alaska sort of situation, where you get these migratory fish coming out of and they even have the proportions of a lake fish, right? Small heads, smaller tails, really big kind of football shaped sort of bodies. And they'll move in, behind suckers when the suckers come in to spawn, or they move in the fall behind the kokanee when the kokanee come in to spawn. And then they're obviously get ready to spawn themselves. So you kind of get this up and down, but you get some abnormal looking fish out there for sure, just biomass.
Talk a little bit about all these reservoirs and the impact they have on the fishing. Obviously, it's, they're tailwaters, but the fish coming from the reservoirs up, there a lot of migrations going on?
Yeah, the mile's the one that sees it the most. There is a reservoir on the downstream side of Grey Reef, but there's a power plant in between, so those fish can't make it all the way through. But the big one that sees the reduction and also the influx of fish would be the Miracle Mile stretch of the North Platte. Those fish move up out of Pathfinder Reservoir certain times a year. You get the rainbows moving up in the spring, and the browns move up in the fall. Obviously, when there's golden stones and that sort of stuff on the mile, those fish in the reservoir kind of know what time of year it is as well, and move up and down. And the sucker spawn thing is a weird one that most people don't think about, but there's a lot of suckers that live in Pathfinder Reservoir, and when they come into that river stretch to spawn, both the rainbows and the brown trout will follow those suckers in and eat the sucker eggs as a food source. So it's, very, very much like Alaska, right?
No kidding. What time of year is that?
That's usually the end of May, first half of June.
Do you have guys that come out and want to hit that sucker spawn? That's like their
for
thing.
sure.
Okay.
An annual thing. Yeah.
Is that my best chance for getting a great big huge fish?
Oddly enough, at the mile, we don't necessarily we see very big fish, but they're kind of sprinkled throughout the year. We see, I would say our average fish that time of year is the best, but I would say it's more, we're pretty fortunate out there. We get a lot of those like post-spawn brown trout, around Thanksgiving or even weeks after Thanksgiving, and swinging trout spay rod or fishing a leech pattern kind of slow and dragging is often when we see some of the bigger fish out of the mile.
Huh. No kidding. So why is it called the Miracle Mile?
That was actually Kurt Gowdy stuck that name to it. So back when Kurt Gowdy used to film the American Sportsman,
Yeah.
he lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and was often trying to film an entire year's worth of TV shows in a very short window in between his broadcasting obligations. And so he would go out there and generally film multiple shows a year, and didn't want anyone to know where he was at.
Is that right? Okay.
So prior to him, it was called the Cortez stretch of the North Platte. And then through his, him referring to it as the Miracle Mile, it just kind of stuck. And there's enough natural landmarks out there, people quickly figured out where it was at, and it just kind of stuck.
So with the quality of this fishery, you guys don't get the crowds that Montana and Colorado get, though, do you? I mean, you're still kind of blessed by that, right?
Yeah, we are blessed by that. I mean, you talk to a local here, and the local would tell you, yeah, it's starting to get crowded. When I grew up around here, my grandfather's rule is if you could see someone, you didn't fish, right? And it didn't matter if that was 700 yards away or half a mile away if you could see someone you didn't fish, right? So that's definitely changed. And obviously with the influx of northern Colorado and their population growing the way it has, there's more and more people coming up here, but we are still with very few people in the grand scheme of a fishery.
That's nice. The word's out though, isn't it? I mean, people know about this.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm, it's it's a constant battle as a fly shop owner, right? You want to inform people and you want to, market and get new people, but then you also realize you're part of the issue as well, right? When you're the one that goes out and you see that there's people in your favorite wade fishing spot that day, but it is what it is.
I with 115 shows, I hope people are spreading out because of the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of different waters, big and small.
Yeah, and I think here often when we experience crowd issues, it's people wanting to get in right below the dam, right? Or people that think just don't realize that there's a fair bit of public land. If you do a little bit of homework, you can easily find a spot where there's really no one else, right? You can really have some peace and serenity and enjoy the day without having to be around other people.
And you've got some kind of restrictive access laws, don't you, there in Wyoming?
We do, yeah. Wyoming's a little unique, much like Colorado. The landowner actually owns the river bed. So we're lucky enough and fortunate enough and put a lot of work into it, but we're affiliated here at the Ugly Bug with the Grey Reef Ranch. So basically the left-hand side of Grey Reef, we own approximately 9.5 miles of river there, which allows us to do some great things. We have some private boat ramps, so we don't have to use the public ramps up by the dam, and we don't have to
Nice.
run through those sort of gauntlets. But so yeah, through the ranch, like anyone can float through, but getting out wade fishing through private property in Wyoming is trespassing. So, and like anything, there's pros and cons to it. It's advantageous because when the fish are on the spawn, people can't get out of the boat on those spawning beds and harass them or fatigue them like they can on some other fisheries, right?
Yeah.
It also reduced some crowds because people realize that they're kind of stuck to the drift boat or the raft or whatever they're using as their means of transportation downriver, that there's certain spots they just can't get out and wade fish. So obviously for us, it's got a bunch of pluses, right? When you're the only one that can wade fish certain stretches, that's pretty nice. And the private boat ramp aspect is pretty nice, but there are some restrictions in Wyoming, and the state's also done a very good job, though. If you're an angler that's wanting to come up and attempt it on your own, there's pretty clear signage, Onyx, all these other, trout routes and all those. You can find many different things that can inform you as to where you're at, and the GPS tracker on your phone can tell you your exact location and help clear up some of those issues that used to be here years ago, where people would get a little confused as to is this private or public.
Right.
Whatever.
It sounds like if I come out there and I want to float with you guys for a couple of days and I want to go off and do some wade fishing on my own, that's all possible.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There's an abundance of both some of that kind of restricted location aspects, as well as, an abundance of public land, and you kind of have it all. You've got, I would think of, for an anglers out there thinking of what the Miracle Mile looks like, I would as closely compare it to the Upper Madison as about any other fishery I've ever seen. It's a higher gradient drop, more boulders and pocket water and islands, and really that looks a lot like the Madison. And then Fremon Canyon's a much smaller piece of water and super wade fishing friendly, easier water to read, just kind of because of its size, right? It kind of makes sense. You see a big oxbow turn with a slow riffle, you kind of think like, okay, there's
Go
the
fish
scene
that.
in the corner. Yeah. The miles or the reef section is probably the hardest of those sections as far as reading the water, just because it's, kind of meandering and slow. It's like a
Yeah.
500 CFS spring creek.
Yeah. Where are they?
Yeah. I mean, the basic rule of thumb is pitch to the center, right? They're in the V trough until the
In the
water.
center, not on the edge. Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of a V trough sort of fishery. So, in a drift boat, it's put your boat 5 feet off the bank and throw towards the center of the river. It's kind of the basic rule of thumb. But as the water comes up and the banks start getting 2 feet or more in water depth, obviously a lot of those fish will push up against the edges and in up towards the bank, which, makes a little more sense for some anglers. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you guys ever guide on the reservoirs themselves? I mean, there's got to be some big trout in there if they're migrating in and out.
We do. Yeah. We got on the reservoirs a little bit for walleye, some for pike, as well as trout. And the one that keeps growing and is becoming a bigger and bigger segment of our business is actually carp. The carp angling around here is a real gem. Pathfinder Reservoir in particular, there's 8 to 9 miles of knee deep or shallower flats.
Yeah.
It really mimics wade fishing for redfish in many situations, but there's a few of us that are pretty obsessed by it. We've got, I think, 4 flats boats now in the fleet. So we got guides pushing flats boats around and chasing carp on the flats, and that keeps growing.
Do they have those $2,000 Able reels with a carp engraved on the side of it while they're doing that?
I think we have one of those, yes. And Ty Halleck, who's a fabulous artist who worked for me for a number of years here and was head guide here at the Ugly Bug. Yeah, we've got a lot of kind of blingy carp artwork due to and his artistic talents. Yeah.
I had Jeff, the CEO of Mayfly,
Oh,
makes
yeah.
Able reels. Yeah. And I asked him that about, does the world need a $3,000 reel? And he says, well, I don't need, want, yes, need, I don't know. But some people, apparently people will buy those reels, they'll catch a big fish with it, and they'll mount the fish and the reel all together. And that's where that reel goes because it's a piece of art. But I don't know. If I'm buying a reel, I'm using it.
We've got a very good customer here that's got, I think, the most complete Able collection. If it's a limited run Able, he's bought it.
Really?
And he's got a couple hundred of them now, and he's got
Wow.
like the sequential number of ACDC reels when they did the ACDC limited run years ago. He's got I think like number 2 through 8 of the Johnny Cash reel when they did the old Johnny Cash
Oh,
reel.
cool.
Yeah, he's got quite the collection. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's really neat. It was Jeff Wagner. That was his name. He did
Yeah.
great. We did a show on carp fishing, as a matter of fact, in Colorado.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah.
So you're from Wyoming, right? And I looked up the town you're from. It's just downstream a little bit from Casper, isn't it?
Yep. My grandpa always used to say, if you have one day to live, you go to Glen Rock, Wyoming, because it'll be the longest day of your life.
What's that mean?
Not much going on. It is pretty slow. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that right? So what did you do in high school do we even want to go there? Like what you did in high school when you were kind of bored?
I was, very focused on athletics and fishing. Those
Cool.
were the fishing, hunting, and sports. That was it. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
You throw in girls in there too, or?
Yeah, a little bit. But I was pretty focused on sports.
Is that right? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was pretty hardcore into it. A family that's very athletic, so it's trying to keep up the family tradition of being a decent athlete kept me pretty busy. Yeah.
Who else is athletic in your family?
About everyone.
Really?
Yeah, I've got aunts, uncles. They all went on to college scholarships to play basketball and football and baseball and
Really?
yeah, with the map. Yep.
Anybody we might have heard of?
My Aunt Linda was a hell of a basketball player. She had the NCAA record in free throw percentage for a number of years.
Wow.
And then, just my dad, typical college baseball player and played some league baseball here and there. And then, kind of all over the map. Uncles played football and just a little bit of everything. So it was, it was just kind of something my family did and was always into. And my dad was the athletic director at my high school. So that played into it as well, right?
Okay.
I was rat and he was a coach when I was growing up. So spent a lot of time in the gym.
So was that harder to be a starter with your dad as the AD and the coach, or was it easier?
100% harder.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, he was, it was great. But at the time, those life lessons when you're a young kid and you make stupid decisions and, I do the same stupid thing as my buddy and I get, suspended for a week and he gets a slap on the wrist and can still play sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
My dad also didn't want to be one of those that thought anyone thought he was showing any sort of favoritism. So
yeah. I actually just read a Harvard Business School case study on Bobby Hurley's father, also named Bobby Hurley. He's the winningest coach in high school basketball, and he's had offers, multi-million-dollar offers.
Sure.
and he coaches at this little 240 person school in Jersey City, New
Yeah.
Jersey. It's poverty, you know, it's crime infested, and that's where he's a probation officer. And the guy's won 1,000 games,
Wow.
and his players have to sign a contract and things like, I will not, you know, my hair will be no shaved, and I'll be, you know, behave in school, and I get good grades, and I'll go to church even, you know, because it's a little Catholic school.
Yeah.
And they had to sign this thing, and he'd like kick people off the team, you know. And so they played Kobe Bryant's team one year, and they beat Kobe Bryant. I don't know if it was a state championship or what, but
Those are hard pills to swallow when you're a kid, but you
man,
know, the boundaries and, you know, we all got to live within some sort of, you know, rules and regulations, right? And
right.
kind of learning that and learning how to operate within it, I think is a very valuable lesson. But at the time, I wasn't all that happy about it.
Yeah, right. And your dad had you in that weight room all the time too?
In the weight room, and yeah, I wore my hat in school, and I'd end up running for an hour after practice, sort of thing. 'Cause I, you know, disrespected the school by wearing a hat, you know, that sort of
So
thing.
that's
Mhm.
great. And you ended up being a shot putter.
Yep. Yeah, I you know, did a lot of things through high school and looked at doing some other sports on the college aspect, but I was a much better shot putter and than anything else. And you know, one of the downfalls of living in a small state like this is when you know, looking to get recruited from colleges and whatnot, they kind of hold the, you know, maybe your competition isn't quite as good, or, you know, which it in the shot put, when you throw a stone for distance, there's no arguing that your competition was weak. It's a distance is a distance. So
Sure.
yeah, and I had a great college experience, a ton of
Cool.
life friends, and one of the most badass coaches in history. He's just an awesome individual and helped me, you know, grow up in a lot of ways, and yeah, made me a pretty darn college athlete. So very thankful for that.
Does he fish? Does he fly fish?
Doesn't fish much. You know, he might be the most dedicated individual I've ever met in my life.
Nice.
He was so gung ho, and that's one reason it's kind of a funny story. When I went on a recruiting trip, you know, it was a typical kind of recruiting trip where people try to take you out and show you a good time, and it just wasn't something I was interested in. Right, and I had left this, you know, typical college party and was walking around on campus at like 11:30 at night, and I actually walked by the arena, and he was asleep on the sofa in his office with the window open, watching video of me throwing in high school. And the only reason I knew it is I heard my high school coach's voice, you know, say my name. And I stopped and looked around. Of course, there's no one around, and then kind of put it together. It was coming from this window, and peek in there, and he's, you know, sound asleep on his couch, been watching tape. And I was like, you know, this guy's this into it.
Wow.
Someone I want to be around.
That's super cool. How did you get connected with your business partner and end up with this ugly bug fly shop?
Yeah, so my partner Brian Martin, an awesome guy. I first met Brian. My dad was his seventh and eighth grade basketball coach. So I was the little rugrat running around. You know, I'm not that much younger than him. I think I'm only 5 years younger, but I was running around the gym and trying to shoot half court shots when I shouldn't be, and do all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I met him there, and then he went on to Laramie and played baseball down here at University of Wyoming, and just, you know, kind of kept in touch and knew of each other as we were, you know, going through school, and
Yeah.
would come back at, you know, typical holidays and see the family, and of course sneak out and go fishing. And then when he bought the ugly bug, I, you know, got word of that, and guiding out of Bozeman, you know, I was in that weird transitional stage in Bozeman where, you know, when I first went to Bozeman, it really wasn't discovered. And, you know, 2001, 2002, town just kept getting more and more discovered and more expensive, and
Bougie.
bougie. And you know, after college, kind of quickly realized I couldn't afford to live there, you know, guiding the number of days I was guiding. So I was looking for avenues to do more days. So I was, you know, guide some on the Missouri and some on the Bighorn out of Fort Smith, and
Sure.
but realized pretty quickly I could come home here and be the hobo that was sleeping in my parents' basement and save even more money and row. And so yeah, kind of ran into Brian, and it ended up working out. So did that kind of transitionally for a couple of years, and then moved back here in 2005. So
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best thing about running a fishing business, and what's the least desirable thing about running a fishing business?
Ooh, I mean, I think like any cool business or anything really, I mean, it's one reason I fish is the people,
There you go.
both the employees I have and dear friends, but many clients and people I've met in the industry have really become a big part of my life. I think people are the biggest plus. Headache aspects, boy, there's a bunch of them when you do what I do for a living. I'm not a big fan of accounting.
Okay. Outsource your headaches. That's
Yeah,
what they say, right? Get an
I
accountant.
try. I
What do
and
I
I have
know?
some great accountants, but it's a specialized enough business. It's kind of a weird, yeah, accounting, inventory control. And also kind of the biggest plus in the people is also kind of the hardest aspect too. Managing people is difficult. And we've got 40, I think 48 employees now as a company. So between, lodge staff and cleaning crews and I would say probably on average a little older demographic than a lot of fishing companies. So my fishing guides are like, this is their profession. This isn't just a job in between
Yeah.
college and moving on to a real job sort of situation. So, a lot of family people, and with that becomes typical family issues of the kids are sick and they can't row, and the wife's got the flu and the kids got to go to the dentist and I can't, so those sort of little ups and downs, keep me on my toes, right?
Where's my check? How come I didn't get a trip?
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
those happen from time to time. No, but pretty blessed there, though. That doesn't happen all that much.
Yeah,
But
good for you. Good for
yeah.
you.
And clients can be just difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a prime example yesterday. We had a guy that booked a trip, confirmed the trip, and he was off by a day,
Oh,
right? So we've got guide waiting for him and we calling him and he's like, I'm not even there. And it's like, well, you booked the lodge, you booked,
everything.
I was wrong on a day. He's like, isn't today Tuesday? I'm like, nope, today is Wednesday. You're
Really? Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
like, he just was off by a day, and yeah, those sort of things make it a little more difficult.
Yeah. And in June, he'd probably lose his place in line, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So you got a funny story about a client you can share? I'm sure you've had a few.
Yeah, I've had all kinds of stuff. I've had fist fights in the boat.
Really?
Yeah, I had two
Fist
brothers.
fights.
I had one brother like hooked a fish and his brother in the back wouldn't get his line out of the way and they got tangled and he lost it. Right. And so then the brother in the front threw a water bottle and smoked the brother in the back in the face. And I kind of look over my shoulder, as the rower, he's up behind me. I look over my shoulder to make sure he's okay and look back forward. And pretty quickly, he's climbing over, like over the top of me. And they go full heads back, swinging as hard as they
Seriously?
can. Yeah. And
Holy smokes.
I'm a big dude. I'm, 6'4", 280, right? And
Oh
then
my
I
gosh.
stand up and grab one of them, chuck them on the side of the boat, and typical brothers, right? They cuss each other for a minute, and then 20 minutes later, they're like, "Don't okay, we're not going to tell mom and dad we fought because they
Really?
won't pay for the trip, right?"
Just like in the living room when they were like 14 or something.
100%.
So how old were they? Like roughly?
Oh yeah, low 20s.
Okay.
Yeah, mom and dad were not quite near us, but we were on a group. We were just on different, off by a couple hundred yards. So they didn't see it.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I've had probably my most interesting one. I had a nudist couple when I guided out of Bozeman that were coming to Yellowstone Park for their honeymoon, and didn't know they were nudist, and honestly could kind of care less until they basically got undressed. We were an hour into the float. It warmed up a little bit, and yeah, we floated the lower Yellowstone kind of along the interstate with husband behind me and his wife in front of me. Not the sort of people you kind of want to see in the nude either. And that stretch of river kind of ebbs and flows and is in and out of like within visual distance of the interstate. So we got truckers honking at us and they're waving and laughing. And of course, I randomly pick a float that there's other people on, floating
Yeah.
that I know. So there's some photo evidence of it, of like one of my buddies in particular, Jameson. He had two younger guys that thought it was hilarious. So every chance they could, especially with the whitefish, they were hooking these whitefish and photographing the whitefish, trying to get us as like the backdrop.
Yeah.
his boat, right? So they were rowed towards us and then posed
to
with
get a
these.
picture, supposedly, of their fish, of a
Yeah,
whitefish. Yeah, trophy
100%.
whitefish. Got to get a picture
Yeah,
of this.
yeah.
So when they started off dressed and it's an hour into it, they're like, did they even ask you? Do you mind if we strip naked?
Unfortunately, they did not ask. And then once I realized what was happening, I tried to, to backpedal a bit on like, well, this is public land, and
I
you
don't
could be
know.
charged with something.
Yeah, it's not legal.
And unfortunately, they kind of had an answer for everything. They were like, well,
Really?
we've been checked multiple times and it's not illegal. And, we had a warden check us once and he still said, well, our fishing licenses still have to be with us somehow. Right. So and yeah, it was interesting. It was very interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm sure there's more questions we can come up with there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Too much information, right? Oh my gosh. Well, let's get back to. I kind of want to get into like the technical side of fishing, like maybe some pro tips. People coming out to fish with you, like what's the, if you got an angler coming from Pennsylvania, what are you telling that guy as you're driving out to the fishing spot?
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of it's gear based. We try to encourage everyone that comes here to this is a trout fishery where you want to have a legit reel. Not saying you don't, if you know what you're doing with a click ball, you can get it done. But, the old adage of a good drag system doesn't have adrenaline definitely comes into play here with some of our bigger fish. So having a good smooth drag system is definitely helpful. Depending on typical kind of cues and coaching tactics of everyone, right? I mean, often with a tailwater fishery, especially when these fish start getting buggy, just telling people to set the hook on anything and everything. Often we get a little spoiled in the spring when they're eating leeches or San Juan worms or any of those sort of odds and ends. They're eating it pretty aggressively, but they start eating little, spent wing tricos or small PMDs. Those strikes can be pretty subtle, and you know, the old adage of believe that it's a fish every time, right?
Okay.
So set the hook on anything and everything. And we see a fair number of people that just, gear wise, maybe aren't quite expecting the size or the quality of the fish that are here. You hook a big fish at the mile, and if you think of like Madison River turbulence, that adds to it as well. And if you're on a 8 foot 4 weight, you're probably going to get schooled.
Yeah. He's going to get below you and you
Yeah.
can't row fast enough.
And the rock structure at the mile, if you're wade fishing, is much like the Madison. It's round, polished boulders that you can't move quickly, right? And so it's not like you can go sprinting down the bank because you're running on a boulder field. So yeah, some of it's gear based. Same old outfitter deal. We often remind people to look up and realize there's an eagle flying overhead, or check out the mountains. And
Yeah.
especially in the spring months when you stare at a strike indicator, you can kind of turn into a zombie.
Totally.
Just watching bobber all day long.
I swear, every time I look up and do what you said, my guide's yelling at me, set the hook.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like right then when I miss the fish, and he's
Yeah.
like, aren't you paying attention? Yeah, I wanted to look up and look at the bighorn sheep on the side of
It's
the mountain,
amazing how it happens. Take a drink of water, whatever it is, right?
set,
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. So you were telling me a couple weeks ago about how you fish streamers, and it was a little different than I'd heard before. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the Platte's kind of unique. We don't have sculpins in this fishery, or I should say in this stretch of the North Platte. The upper North Platte above Seminole Reservoir does have sculpins in it.
Yeah.
Here on the lower stretches of the North Platte, the streamer fishing can be very, very good, but it's really the fish are eating those, those streamers either as leeches, crayfish, baby rainbows, baby browns, baby suckers, baby carp. But a really aggressive strip isn't all that effective. At times it can be when the fish are up on the banks that just impulse smack it. Like many anglers that come here from Montana kind of have a tendency to pitch upstream with the streamer and kind of fish the streamer line with a belly because they've seen production from that, right? Because the sculpins, when they're fleeing, are going downriver, and that's just not something naturally that our fish ever see, right? So a slower kind of swinging technique, much like the Missouri River in Montana, is much more effective. And some of that has to do with Obviously no sculpins. A lot of it also has to do with just the raw number of leeches and crawfish in this fishery due to that bentonite material. There's a lot of life in the mud, right? There's a lot of life laying on bottom. So this kind of slower, swinging operation is very effective, especially when the water temps are cooler.
All right. So tell me how you do that. Describe how that works. Slower swinging.
Yeah, so if you really think about how a spey rod angler would set up, you quarter your cast. If you're throwing a sink tip, that you would quarter your cast, straight across the river or slightly downstream, quarter it downstream at a third of an angle and kind of let your line belly and let the streamer, kind of bounce and tick and you can still feel the contact, but let it bounce and tick through the bottom as it moves. We're fortunate enough we don't have a ton of snagging debris here
Oh, good.
because of some of that silt, so you can kind of let it swing. A lot of our streamers are tied with dumbbell eyes that we put on the top of the hook so that the hook point rides
Sure.
up.
Flips over. Yeah.
Helps us, reduce some snagging issues as well. Yeah, so I think everyone goes through this weird evolution in streamer fishing where you're kind of good at it when you're not good at it because the strip's kind of irregular and
Yeah. Right.
real calculated, right? And then you get smooth and even and you fish it what you think is well, but you're not really presenting the bug in the most ideal situation. It doesn't look wounded or weak. It's not really hovering or slowing down at any point. It's not really presenting 90-degree angles. And so, once you kind of get over that hump and you realize that some kind of erratic nature and letting it tick bottom at times or slowing it down can be super effective.
So
Yeah.
I think when you said put a belly in the line, I always think that's going to really speed up the fly. No?
Well, it does speed it up a little bit. Generally, we're fishing it with a sink tip. So
Okay.
the river's moving slow enough that
Oh.
if you didn't have a belly, it would just go to bottom and sit often
Oh, okay.
at that quartering angle. So the kind of belly, not a belly, if we think river running left to right, having a belly towards the right-hand angle. So it's leading the fly where it should go.
Okay.
Is really what we're after, right? So not a huge belly, but enough to kind of keep it moving more in that half arc circle versus coming straight across the current or
I
down.
gotcha.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite leech and worm and crawfish patterns?
I've always somewhat personally chuckled at leech patterns. Like so many of them, especially when I first kind of got in the industry, were, rabbit and super fat and dense. And, through entomology courses and really kind of looking at leeches, like they never look like that. They're often the diameter of a pencil and they're, especially when they're moving, they're long and cylindrical. So we dye a lot of leeches here with pine squirrel
Pine squirrel.
instead of rabbit.
Okay.
And we'll do them everything from like size 16,
Really?
very small little leeches, all the way up to, 6s and 8s,
Wow.
but pretty sparse, right? Just a chunk of pine squirrel as a tail and then a small little collar. Landon Meyer has a really good one that just came out as well that fishes very well around here. For years, John Barr's old Slump Buster fished pretty well, but even that's kind of robust and thick for what a realistic leech really looks like when
Yeah.
it's moving. So yeah, kind of our pine squirrel leech or a skinny squirrel pine leech is super effective. That new lightning leech is very good as well. We've had a lot of luck with that. It's basically a chunk of brown shoe leather
Yeah. Is that right?
with
Complicated.
yeah, I mean it's got a flashback to it and some epoxy, but it fishes very well. But I think part of that's just it's the right profile, right? It's not chunky and leeches don't look like golf balls. They're not supposed to be these big round fluff balls. They're long and cylindrical. So yeah, so that that on the leech aspect, there's a really kind of famous streamer here tied by Trent Tatum called a rusty trombone. This is an olive with a little bit of flashback. That's probably the #1 streamer here on the North Platte.
Really?
It's kind of light and wispy, but does a very, very good job of imitating a baby rainbow.
Yeah.
I'm partial to one of my patterns called the Ditch Witch. That's kind of the same in the same family a little bit. Kind of light and wispy and a lot of movement, both in the olive color scheme and kind of white and flashy color scheme that does a really good job of imitating those baby carp and baby suckers. It's kind of more in that color scheme.
How come you call it the ditch witch? Did you spend some time digging ditches with a ditch witch when you were a
No,
youngster?
that's kind of the old adage. A lot of people call the North Platte the ditch.
Oh, okay.
The old timers used to always call it the big irrigation canal, right?
Yeah.
Because it's irrigation based flow. So it was kind of an inside joke, and then the name just kind of stuck.
And you're an Umpqua signature tire, aren't you?
Yep.
Nice job. Yeah, and you've got another one, McGruber. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and it's initially kind of designed trying to come up with a really good midge pattern, and it really didn't fish well as a midge, and that was kind of where the McGruber thing came by. It was a couldn't do anything right sort of deal, kind of like the old movie MacGruber with trying to copy MacGyver or be a spoof on
Oh, is that
MacGyver.
right? Okay.
Yeah, so that's grown. It's multiple colors now with a glass bead with a foam back, right? More of an emerger style, but that's been a very good pattern both in Montana and in here as well. And is one of my favorites. In a lot of locations is a small little emerging pattern. It does. I like the way it produces very much. It's a good one.
Yeah. And you're catching fish on crawfish patterns, trout on crawfish patterns.
Straight crawfish, like Bob Clauser's crayfish is one of the best. That thing is just gangbusters around here. A good old Clauser cray and the tan turkey back is super, super effective.
No kidding. Now, you haven't talked really much about like your seasons and hatches and things like that, but say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, a typical trout stream, we kind of get the full, I always think of hatches on a trout stream, much like the dial of a clock, right? It makes
Sure.
this giant rotation and kind of comes back to where it starts. But, we got midges basically year round. We've got the standard food source things that we've kind of covered, the leeches, crawfish, worms. But, here come, the first week of May, we start seeing good blueing activity. Really good blueing olives that'll run May and in June, and then we start moving into a little bit of sulfur stuff, but really go kind of straight into PMDs and yellow sallies.
Oh, good.
Generally get pretty good grasshopper activity. In typical western plains, you get a lot of dry grass, and those fish move towards the riverbanks, so get some pretty good hopper activity. Lots of yellow sallies. This fishery has a really high density of yellow sally stoneflies, and it kind of just reverts back the other direction. We go back into sulfurs and PMDs, and then back into blue wings in the fall months, and kind of coincides with those sulfurs, and then pseudos, and then we go back into the midge stuff midwinter. But you always have the standard always sort of patterns and those leeches and worms and that are always around. Yeah. The Grey Reef stretch doesn't get much for big stoneflies. We don't get big golden stones or salmon flies, but the mile does get some of that, primarily golden stones. But so they see a little bump in the golden stone activity in the June time period into. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, good. Boy, we really covered a lot. What haven't I asked you that I should be asking you? What else do you want to talk about?
No, I think you pretty well got it covered. We've covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyone looking to come to Casper, it's a relatively easy transportation sort of thing if they're trying to come out. Casper's got an airport here. A lot of folks kind of make a weird little loop or try to see some of Wyoming, and obviously flying into a place like Denver is a little more cost effective than flying directly into here to Casper. And we're about 4.5 hours from Denver, so all interstate. So not a horrible drive if you're
Yeah,
around.
nice.
But between Yellowstone Park and the great state of Wyoming and all the outdoors, there's a ton of stuff that goes on here. A lot of fun.
Hard to beat it. Hard
Yeah.
to beat it. That's for sure. What's your favorite shore lunch you guys are cooking up for your clients?
Oh, we're pretty spoiled. We've got 5 pretty fancy gazebos now that we've built on the ranch. So our chef does some really cool shore lunch stuff. They're all pretty quick, but we'll do everything from fajitas and meatball subs to hamburgers and green chili burgers, and it's you never really quite know what she's got in the mix for it, but she does a great job for us. And those lunch are kind of nice to jump in there and barbecue and eat a hot meal and get out of the sun or the wind or the snow or whatever it may be.
So you have a chef.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have a lodge as well. So she cooks for our lodge guests also, but does our meal preps for lunches and takes care of us. She's when you kind of, a guy like me, when you look around at one of the harder positions to find the right person for, that's a really difficult one. And she's a real blessing. She's been awesome to have.
That's
Yeah,
great. And it sounds like you're building her a house right now.
Yeah, just finishing it up. She's been one that's needed some attention, and it kind of got to a point it was just time to doze it and start over. So I'm trying to send it all up. Yeah.
It sounds like she's a keeper.
Yeah, she for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, so at the end of the day, where do you like to go to get a beer and something to drink, something to eat at the end of the day? What are your favorite spots?
It's kind of weird how that's progressed here in Casper as well. We've Casper's nightlife scene's really kind of flourished. Right next to my fly shop here, there's a great called the Ribbon Chop House, a great steak and burger, and pretty quiet. And then right around the corner, there's a really cool, just straight up burger joint with a great bar in it as well, called the Branding Iron. But we've got 6 or 7 small breweries here in town now, and that's really expanded. And City Casper has done a bunch of good work. We got a cool amphitheater and have a lot of live music in the summer months.
Oh, good.
Bigger and bigger kind of, musicians making their stop over here. So yeah, it's a great place. Yeah.
I did a show with a guy in the Black Hills, and he said Snoop Dogg comes out. He's come out a couple times and played it when the big motorcycle thing's going on. Snoop Dogg in the Black Hills. Now there's one I just wouldn't have figured.
Yeah, we've got an interesting one. Jeff, I don't know if you're familiar with Jeffree Star. Jeffrey moved to Casper, Wyoming. So Jeffrey's one of the larger YouTube personalities. Has his own makeup line. He's a really interesting guy, but he bought a ranch right outside of Casper here. And he's got a makeup, his store is right behind my fly shop. It's makeup and meat. So he actually runs
makeup and meat. What's that mean?
Yeah, he actually runs a yak ranch as well, and he butchers yak. So they sell, gourmet yak meat, but he's really known for his makeup line and be a huge YouTube personality. So a lot of people are traveling here to come to Jeffrey's store and check it out.
Is that right? What's a yak? You ever eaten the yak meat? What's that taste like?
I have a couple of times. Yeah, I've eaten yak. First time was in Mongolia when I was fortunate enough to fish Mongolia. Yeah, it's to me it's a lot like buffalo. It's very good. But,
it is.
Yeah,
how about that?
Very good.
You mentioned Mongolia. I just recorded a show last week with Fish Mongolia Outfitters. Mike
very familiar. Yep.
Remember that group? Oh yeah, is that right? Okay.
Very familiar with Mark. Yep.
That's who you went. You went with those guys, huh? Did you get a Taiman?
Yep. Been there a couple of times and had trips, hosted a few trips there. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, it sounds amazing. And Taiman get to be 50 inches. It's a trout that's 50 inches long.
And they're, watching them eat a topwater gurgler is, I think anglers all fish for different reasons, but for me, it's like creating a memory, right? It's something I'll never forget. And watching a taiman track down and seeing the wake coming of it chasing like a gartside gurgler or a big mouse on the surface. That's the anticipation and the adrenaline rush before it happens. And they eat, to me, much like a cutthroat, right? It's kind of this slow rolling effect, and you have to wait. You have to wait for them to get the nose down. It's like the old God Save the Queen thing when fishing for cutthroat, right? And it's kind of easier said than done when it's a 40-inch fish and you see it roll over your fly, to not just yank like hell and take it away from them. It's hard to be patient, but it's a real gem. In the countryside and the people, it's an amazing trip.
Yeah.
What they've done there as far as the, infrastructure and the support, for someone like me, when you travel to a place like that, you kind of always look at like, what are the logistics of doing something like this? Right. And it's amazing, it's a really first-class operation considering the logistics. It's nothing about it is easy.
Yeah. Mongolia, there's one major city in that entire country, and it's the size of Alaska, bigger than Alaska.
Yeah.
Ulaanbaatar. I learned how to say it by doing this podcast. So
very, very unique. Very unique when you leave town and you're 5 miles out of town and you're like, well, what happened to a road? There's no road. Driving through the prairie and boondocking wherever they can drive. It's that, I'm of course thinking like, does they even know where they're going? Like drive for hours and it's just driving ridge tops and
Yeah.
sure enough, you show up right where you need to be.
Yeah, we've been crossing these hills since Genghis Khan. You're okay with us?
You're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, man, Blake, it's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. How can people get in touch with you?
Pretty simple. Ugly Bug Fly Shop. Our outfitting side of the business is called Crazy Rainbow Fly Fishing. So you can find us at either of that. Obviously, drop us an email or give us a ring here. Yeah, we're happy to get back to you however we can. But all the major social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, we try to be a little bit everywhere. So
There you
not
go.
hard to find us. Yep.
Folks, if you're heading to the North Platte, Grey Reef, and the Mile, Blake is your man. Please check him out. Blake, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of the Destination Angler. We'll be sure to post Blake's contact info on the Destination Angler show notes and some exclusive pictures of his top fly picks and some beautiful shots, scenery, and fish in the area on my Instagram and Facebook page. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig@destinationanglerpodcast.com. If you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see. Yeah.